Hey guys, welcome back to Currently Workshopping. I know it's been a while since I posted anything on YouTube or on this podcast, but I have been deep in the throes of trying to figure out my second draft for my book and going through all these narrative arc stuff, hero's journey stuff, and I started my second draft today, so yay, it's going pretty well. But I did want to make this video in the heat of it in real time because I fucked up my taxes. And by that I mean, okay, let's back up a little. Yeah, I fucked up my taxes. And I never thought that I would be a person to fuck up something like taxes. And I don't mean that in a, oh, I'm so smart at taxes way, but I mean it in a, I am so scared of money stuff that I usually over prepare for things. One of the misconceptions, the popular misconceptions about people who work in high salary jobs, like as a big law associate, for example, or in consulting or finance, is that because you work a high salary job, you must be good with money. That is abjectly false. Like, it is so false. I do think that if you find yourself in a high salary job, you usually fall in one of two categories, right? One is, yeah, you are actually good with money and you are good at personal finances, and you calculated that being in this high salary job will get you the future that you want and the savings and the retirement and blah, blah, blah. The 529s for your kid. I think that's right. I think that's the college fund. Like, you did all that. That's awesome. But I think the second type of person who finds themselves in high salary jobs are people who are so scared of money, who suck at money, who can't even really think about money without getting some sort of anxiety, that they will do anything to not think about it. They will study for years and years at school. They will work 24/7 at jobs that do pay a lot but also demand quite a lot in hours. They will suppress their own thoughts about what they want to do in order to only gun and apply for the high paid jobs that we all know are highly paid. And guess which category I'm in? The second one. I think I used to have an ability to pass as a member of the first one, that I was actually just good with money. And in some ways I am, right? Like, I always maxed out my 401k contributions, my HSA contributions. Like, there were some things I did that were very, very wise, but it wasn't necessarily because I was good with money. It was because I was so scared of money, I couldn't look it in the eye ever. I could only get as much money as I possibly could and then stash away like a little squirrel as much money as I possibly could. And that kind of is what leads us to where I am today. One of the things I had been looking forward to about self-employment was actually being in a lower tax bracket, right? I think as a lawyer, I was in a pretty high tax bracket, and I was like, all right, for a little while, I'll be making less. That's fine, because I'll also be in a lower tax bracket. Like, it would be really awesome to not have as much taken away in taxes every year. That is what I thought. So I looked at my federal tax bracket that I would be in with my new self-employment income, and I added a little bit to that for state taxes, and then I just only saved that. I only saved that amount from how much I made every month. And I was like, okay, great. It wasn't until my accountant gave me my estimated taxes due that I realized I had omitted this little thing, and by little I mean not very little because it's actually 15.3%, called self-employment taxes. And this is one thing that I actually don't see talked a lot about when people encourage you to quit your job and start your own business or become an entrepreneur, right? Or at least I haven't really heard legitimate detailed discussion about the self-employment tax. I'm sure it's out there. I think, again, one of my issues is that I am scared of money, so I didn't go out of my way trying to investigate all the details of what taxes would be like now that I work for myself. That's totally on me. But I am now relaying this to you in case you are also someone who has been thinking about becoming self-employed, but don't really know the potential downsides of doing so. And one of the downsides is this self-employment tax, 15.3%. And it's something I didn't really account for because I really just looked at my income. I was used to only paying income taxes. And I did have some self-employment taxes from the year I quit, where I kind of had like hybrid income, right? I had both W-2 income and self-employment income, but I think my self-employment income just wasn't that high that year because of it being hybrid, that the amount I paid in taxes in self-employment that year was much lower than what I got hit with for this year. And let me tell you, that was very jarring. I ended up asking a lot of people around, other entrepreneurs I know, other law firm partners. See, that's another thing. Law firm partners are self-employed, so becoming partner does also mean that you have to pay more in taxes because now all of a sudden you are self-employed. I used to hear law firm partners complain about things like taxes and health insurance premiums, and especially as a first year, I would kind of just like roll my eyes, right? I was like, why are you complaining? You make so much money. And even though I think there is a time and place to complain about certain things, especially when you make millions of dollars, you probably shouldn't be complaining to someone who doesn't. But I also understand where they are coming from now, because the first year when you don't account for your self-employment tax, man, that sucks. But I asked around, and if you find yourself in a situation where you are now self-employed or something like a firm partner or anything that is considered like a partnership, then you in a high income tax state like New York or California, everyone told me the rule of thumb is that you need to put away 50% of your income every month for taxes. 50%. I think I just was floored because my income tax bracket when I was in Big Law, federal, was 35%. So I was like, it can't be more than that. Whew. And yet, my friends in low income tax states like Florida, Texas, they do say that they put away about like 30% in order to cover things like self-employment tax and income tax, which is zero, right? But of course, they also say that, you can't make life decisions solely based upon state income tax because then there are other services that you don't get. So I'm not saying I'm complaining about my taxes because I'm really not. I am expressing that I am surprised and disappointed by how poorly I prepared for my taxes. Despite being, I think, a fairly educated person, despite having taken taxation in law school, despite, generally thinking that I research things, but if I have a blind spot when it comes to anything, it is definitely money stuff because of aforementioned fear about money and aforementioned shying away from everything about money. And when I found out that I owed this additional 15.3%, I was like, oh God, like I have that. Like I am very, very lucky and fortunate that I have saved away enough just like in savings accounts to cover that. That's great. But it did require me to liquidate my emergency savings account, which is like the savings account that has your 6 months of expenses that you do not want to touch really ever. Or like, when you start touching it, and my plan for it was when I start touching it, then that's when I have to start seriously thinking about applying for jobs again. So I did not anticipate dipping into that, and especially not for a reason like taxes, But of course, taxes come all at once, and that is just the nature of taxes. So I had to use that account to pay off my taxes for this year. And that's fine. That's fine. But then it comes to the second order question, right? Which is, what do I do now that I have essentially drained my emergency savings account, the one that I was not supposed to use? And this question took me a little bit longer to think through, because it's not like I am broke, right? Like, I have investments. I have a 401k. The problem is, in my head, investments and 401k are things you never touch. Like, they are just things that you squirrel away and you just leave them. You pretend that they don't exist. It's like non-money, even though I get it's money. I was always really confused sometimes when people would be like, oh, but even though your, income that you get every month seems lower than what you actually earn, you still have that money in your 401k. And I'm like, yeah, but if I can't use it, like, is it real? Is it really money? So I just never really thought of that money as real. And now I am at a point where, because my emergency savings account was essentially liquidated, I have to think about turning to my investments and, selling them in order to replenish my emergency savings account, or dipping into my 401k, like withdrawing early, which I know there is a penalty, I know. And I don't know, this isn't like really a position I wanted to be in, and my first response really was like, it's time to start applying for jobs, Cece. Even though I am really in the midst of like my second draft, which I think is like going to be a really, really important draft for my book, and I would like to not do that and apply for jobs at the same time. I really would. But even despite the fact that, like, creatively I would like to do nothing, there is a part of me, this like very anxious part, this part that learned from her parents that the key to stability in life is getting someone else to consistently pay you. That's just what my parents really taught me you should do in life. There's a part of me that really, really wants to do that. That is like just scolding myself, saying, all right, Cece, you tried this, it was a fun experiment, and you know what? You can't cut it. Like, you go back to work. There's other things, like go back and rely on a corporation to pay you every month. But at the same time, there is another part of me that really thinks me investing in myself right now is a better probability of returns than investing in the market, investing in my investments, investing in my 401k. So I gave this a little thought, right? Like, is it abjectly stupid to liquidate my investments? Is it horrendously dumb to withdraw early from my 401k? And I thought a little about it, and I saw how much money I have in both my investments and my 401k. And I kind of came to the conclusion that if push comes to shove, during this time, during this year, during the early parts of next year, I will liquidate my investments and I will withdraw early from my 401k account in order to float myself during this time. And before you shout at me about how stupid that is, how it violates like every single personal finance rule, I know. Like, remember my Asian parents? Like, I know. But at the same time, I do think there is a time in everyone's life where it is the right time to play it a little risky. it is the time to make a calculated bet, and especially if the calculated bet comes from asymmetric information, right? Like you feel like you know something about the market or what's happening more so than everyone else. And I think that's where I am right now. My asymmetric information is just my belief in my book and myself, and feeling like I am onto something for maybe the first time in my life that is both aligned with what I want, but also aligned with maybe what the market might reward. And I could be wrong. I could be wrong. There is no certainty in life, right? Not even if I had a W-2 job. I could just get fired or laid off. So I might be wrong, but I have played it safe all my life, right? Like, I have never had credit card debt. I have only applied to the like highest salary jobs. Even the most risky financial decision I ever made, which was to take out loans for law school, isn't actually that risky considering the salary prospects coming from a highly ranked law school. And I've just played it safe my entire life. And if this doesn't pay off, I will go back to playing it safe. But I do think, I don't know, somehow like I believe that investing in myself at this moment is a better return than investing in the market in my 401k, if it comes to that. And that is why, even though there is a part of me screaming at myself to go back and stop being lazy and indulgent and, and delusional, to go, there's that part that's like, stop doing all that and go get a job. I am not going to, and I am going to rely on my investments and my 401k in between my advances to get through this time, because the worst case scenario for me, for everything that I've done in my life, is I will apply to jobs again end of next year. And that's fine. That's fine. I will go back to apply to jobs again, and I will max out my 401k as normal and do all of that as normal and return to my safe path. But right now, that doesn't feel like where I should be going, because it would just distract me from making the best piece of art I can that I really believe in. So, yeah, that's kind of the rationale behind all of this. And I go into a lot more about like the actual economics calculations of like asymmetric bets and asymmetric information in my Substack, which I will link to below. Go check that out if you want just like, more links about stuff and like more background about stuff. I have it all in there, including why I think sometimes asymmetric information could just be delusion, and you shouldn't make bets with your life or bets with your income in those situations, but also times when asymmetric information might not be delusions and circumstances under which it does make sense to take these risks. I think figuring out when and why to take risks in life is really difficult, right? Because they are risks. I mean, they're called risks for a reason, but it doesn't mean that you should never take it. I think it's just about figuring out why and when and how. And for all of that, you have to kind of take a closer look at your reality and just the factors of payoff, your flexibility for slack, right? Like how much cushion you have, and also your full belief in yourself, which could be delusional. Okay, and before I go, I know there's probably some questions about like, oh, but like, you have a partner, why don't you just ask him to help you at this time? I feel so uncomfortable doing that, and it's funny because we might actually have to get married soon, legally. for health insurance reasons. But even then, I was raised in such a way to like be fiercely independent, to not rely on others, and that'll be a separate video slash Substack, I think, because I've been talking with my therapist a lot about why that might be. So that's a separate thing. And yeah, I know I could ask for help from my partner, and you know, I might. I might, but I feel really, really uncomfortable thinking about it as even really an option. And that's just due to my own upbringing and how I think oftentimes, especially perhaps in Chinese culture, where there's a lot of accounting between people, right? It's like you give them gifts and they kind of remember what gifts you gave them and then they give you gifts back. In this kind of accounting, I feel like unfortunately my parents also kept that accounting with me at times. So it just makes accepting help very difficult. But I will figure it out. I will get through it and it will be the subject of a future video. But yeah, I will talk to you guys later. And thanks for listening to my little PSA. And I hope this helps you figure out when and where and how and why to take risks in your own life, because you shouldn't play life entirely safe. Okay? Have a little fun.